Greetings and welcome to Sister Source Conversations, where we have engaging topics and equally engaging guests. Today, our topic is the organization, the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists. And our guests are Dr. Dan McKanan. He is the Emerson Senior Lecturer at Harvard Divinity School, where he supports students that are preparing for Unitarian Universalist ministry. And he has authored a number of books on religion and social change in the United States and beyond. We also have Erin Aslami, first-year student in a Master's of Divinity program at Harvard, and she is working as a research assistant for the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists. Welcome, Erin and Dan. I am so excited. When I ran across the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists, I can't tell you, I was making all kind of noise and just beside myself, because I'm very much interested in congregational research. I believe that the research that comes out of congregations forms the narrative for their congregation, forms and contributes to the narrative of who Unitarian Universalism is and what it is, so on and so forth. So to have the participation of as many of our congregations as possible is so exciting. So please jump right in and share with us what the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists actually is.
Sure. Thank you so much for that introduction. The Circle is a coordinated effort to bring congregational histories that exist together and to fill in the ones that are not existing yet. So part of our effort is outreach to help bring awareness to this project and effort, and help lay people know that this is research that they very much have the skills to do and can contribute towards. And part of it is to bring all of those efforts into a database together, where we have a collected archive of stories, of written histories, of physical archives, online primary sources, everything all in one spot, so that we can learn from different areas and see how other people have written their stories, see where we can be looking for more resources. That is what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Anything you want to add to that, Dan? That was pretty comprehensive, I would say.
Yeah, well, I just would say that in doing this work for Unitarian Universalists everywhere, we are really building on the initiative of a dedicated circle of congregational historians, originally in the old Prairie Star District and now in the Mid-America region, who were the first ones that came up with the idea of creating a comprehensive list of the histories of particular congregations that have been written. So they compiled their list. It's available through the Meadville Lombard website. And one of their leaders, Victor Urbanowitz, then began lobbying the UU History and Heritage Society, now the UU Studies Network, to take on the task on a larger scale. And we've had a few fitful starts, and we're right now again in a period of energetic outreach spearheaded by Erin. So if you are the person who is responsible for telling the story of your congregation, if you are the person who tries to keep your congregation's historical records free from the moth that consumes, we'd love to hear from you and incorporate you into our circle.
Mm-hmm. I'm noticing that the larger congregations may oftentimes have a part-time, maybe even a full-time position dedicated to, whether they call it librarian, archivist, historian, or a combination of those titles. Are you finding also that the smaller congregations, or maybe sometimes even the mid-sized congregations, are not as intentional about maintaining their archives and various documents.
I've noticed kind of in trying to outreach to as many congregations as possible that many who don't have a dedicated member have somebody who's been doing it in the back of their mind. Sometimes there's an anniversary project and somebody has a collection of records in their basement, or happens to know somebody 2 generations ago who was keeping track of things. And so there is a network that exists that we just have to make more intentional. So that's what I've noticed, Dan. I don't know.
Yeah, when you said part or even full-time, I immediately thought of All Souls in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure if that's part of what you were thinking of when you said that, because I know that is one congregation that has made the choice to keep their archives in-house, which not every congregation does, not every congregation should do, but they made the further choice to really be responsible in keeping their archives in-house. So the work that they've done is really a beacon. But most other congregations may not have the resources to do it that way, but likely you will be able to find real partners, either at Harvard Divinity School Library or Meadville Lombard Library, or the library of your local or state historical society. These are all entities that would be more than happy to work with a particular congregation to ensure that its records are well cared for posterity.
I think you're making an important point, and that is the congregation does not have to take this on alone, that there are other resources out here, and they don't have to be fully responsible for understanding all the dynamics of archiving and so on and so forth, if they identify the resources that are available. So can you talk a little bit about, so for UU congregations, what resources besides the circle are available to our congregations?
I could say a few things. So Meadville, Lombard, Starr King, and Harvard Divinity School are the 3 educational institutions that have a stake in this work. Starr King has a very interesting rare book collection. It's probably not especially focused on congregations, but for anybody whose congregation has a partner congregation in Transylvania, there's definitely materials in Starr King's rare book collection that would be interesting.
Okay.
Both on Meadville Lombard and Harvard Divinity School are the permanent home for the records of significant numbers of congregations. So quite a few congregations have reached out to those 2 libraries and said, hey, we'd like you to take our stuff. But in addition, both of those libraries hold resources from the denominational bodies, the UUA and its predecessors, that may be relevant to the study of a particular congregation. So Harvard Divinity School is the official archive of the UUA and holds most records produced by the UUA. For various reasons, Meadville Lombard also holds some records. And the UUA has always kept records on local congregations. A portion of those records are at Harvard and a portion are at Meadville Lombard. So if you're curious kind of what the denominational bureaucrats have thought about your congregation, you can find out, at least to the extent that they put their thoughts on paper and into a file folder. Both of those libraries also have a variety of online resources that could be very interesting. So, for example, at Harvard, one of our reference librarians, Gloria Korsman, just kind of went on the web and said, what are the materials relevant to particular congregations that are just already publicly accessible on the web. And she tried to just create as comprehensive a list as she could of things ranging from images of church buildings that may no longer exist to anniversary sermons, where the pastor back in 1890 told the story of the first 100 years of the congregation or something like that. So if you just go either to the Harvard Divinity School library website or the Meadville Lombard library website and start playing around, you'll find a lot of interesting things.
Okay. I think it's helpful for congregations to hear, congregational leaders to hear that there are resources available to assist them. What do you say to congregational leaders who seem not to have an appreciation, I'm being very diplomatic, appreciation for the need to archive their documents, to be intentional about the maintenance, care of their documents, so on and so forth? How do you stir up the interest and some passion around this without making it seem like it's additional work that we've got to do on top of everything else within congregational life? How do you stir up some passion and enthusiasm around congregational histories and archives?
One thing that I admire about Unitarian Universalism is its presence in social justice issues, making sure that it's really paying attention to today's communities. And I think that our congregations can see how that ties to its historical narratives. So a lot of congregations have found meaning in tracing their social justice efforts. We can learn from our role models from the past, learn from our mistakes from the past, and any progress that we want to make is built on history. So that's what I try to keep in mind when I'm thinking about the importance of this work, is that progress needs history. History needs progress.
Yeah, I would definitely very much echo that. And I think to some extent, you sort of framed the obstacle as historical disinterest, Kiama, but in some ways, an even more challenging obstacle is the obstacle of what's sometimes called antiquarianism. The tendency to see the past as an end in itself, rather than as something that is living on in both inspiring and undermining ways in the present. And as Erin was suggesting, there's important aspects of our justice work today that we simply cannot do if we don't understand the past. So the work that you've been doing of lifting up the stories of Black women's presence within Unitarian Universalism over a long time frame is, it's crucially important, and it requires an enormous amount of historical sophistication, because those aren't the stories that are going to be on the top of the pile of materials that are available archivally. Those are the stories that we can tell only if we know how to kind of move back and forth between the records that a congregation keeps and census records or town records or other kinds of things, because unfortunately so many past histories have been written as the sort of chronology of the ministers, and that doesn't tell the full story of who we've been and all the pasts that we can continue to be in relationship with today. I've also been really inspired by congregations like our congregations in Gloucester and Rockport, Massachusetts, our congregation in North Andover that have done, the hard and courageous work of finding out the ways they have been complicit in structures of oppression, particularly structures of enslavement and settler colonial land theft, and are finding ways not just to learn the stories, but to tell them. In the case of Gloucester and Rockport, on a very interesting website. In the case of North Andover, some posters they created to display prominently in the church to say, we've been part of these structures of oppression, and here are the ways we're trying to make reparation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great observation on your part, because one of the things that I'm noting as a Black woman, Unitarian Universalist, is that in some instances, our presence has been rendered invisible. Now, there are some instances we simply were not present in a particular congregation, in a particular area, so on and so forth. But there have been other instances where we were present. However, the lens by which individuals were viewing their history and who was significant and important were not necessarily BIPOC individuals. And so I think in terms of more contemporary efforts, going in with an anti-racist lens, going in looking for those individuals that were invisible in the past, I think is helpful, because we then begin to see individuals that we didn't necessarily, that maybe our earlier efforts did not necessarily uncover. The other thing that a conclusion I've come to very, very recently. So after exploring the histories of these historic personalities, the Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Florida Ruffin Ridley, Marie Baldwin, so on and so forth, unless there are more documents that are uncovered, we have pretty thoroughly, not just UUs, but historians in general, researchers in general, have pretty much explored their lives and gathered primary documents. So it occurred to me, are we neglecting contemporary individuals coming through our doors? Are we failing to pay attention to their contributions and to what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're writing and reflecting on? And so I don't think it should be an either or. I think it should be an and, that we should be continuing to pay attention to these historic personalities that have shaped our faith tradition, that have shaped congregational life. And we should be paying attention to those individuals coming through the doors that are providing leadership, oftentimes innovative ideas, thinkers that are on the margins, so on and so forth. And I'm excited about the possibilities of our congregations beginning to lift up some of those contemporary stories, some of those movers and shakers that are coming through their doors. So I don't want this to be an either or. I want us to be inclusive in terms of how we're really approaching the research and the archiving of information, so on and so forth. And I want us to really, I want this to become very much a part of congregational life. It's like we exist and we want others to be aware of our existence, our contributions, those places that maybe we did not stand on the side of justice. And then those moments that we did, that we stood up we put our faith in action. I'm speaking about this because I'm talking with Jim, and his last name is escaping
Kelly.
me right now.
Is it Jim Kelly?
Yes, thank you, Jim Kelly, because we've been talking about the UU Congregation of Atlanta and their history. So they've had a history early on where they actually denied membership to the first Black individual that came through their doors. And yet they rallied, they put their faith in action, and they became the first faith community to integrate in Atlanta. So hearing the full story makes their current story even more remarkable in terms of where they came from. And then to hear, having shifted their attitudes, they had individuals like, there I go again with my memory thing. Oh goodness, it'll come to me in a minute. I'm getting to the point where if I don't write it down, I can't remember. Whitney Young. Whitney Young was a member at UU Congregation of Atlanta. There was another individual whose name I cannot recall, but he was the dean of the School of Social Work at Atlanta University before it became Clark Atlanta University. He was a member at UUCA. I also have this one story I just have to tell. So Coretta Scott King and the contact person at UU Congregation of Atlanta got together and they began to have these exchanges with the youth. And so the next meeting was approaching and they got threats from the KKK. And so the contact person at UUCA contacts Coretta Scott King to inform her to see if they wanted to cancel the meeting. Coretta Scott King said, no, let's go ahead with it. However, what was different about this meeting is the adults decided we are not going to let the KKK intimidate us. And so I think they were mostly males, but they certainly were the adults, surrounded the building that they were meeting at. And as a result, there was not any violence. The KKK was not able to intimidate them. This is one of those stories that I think is so important in the history of the congregation because of where they came from early on and how they were able to grow and progress and be a social change agent in the community. We can only have these stories to share if we're doing the research, if we're paying attention to our history and we're capturing it. So I had to share that story, and that's just one of many. UUCA has really done a good job. Not only do they have written documents, they've put together some really outstanding videos. And I think that's also another very effective way to capture the attention and the interest of members and others. You know, I'm working with thinking about what brings people to websites, so on and so forth. And so I'm thinking about what individuals are attracted to, which is why I said to you that I only wanted to do 30 minutes or less, because I'm noticing folks don't want long, they want it quick. But the point is that we're going to miss these stories if we are not capturing them, whether it's in the moment or we're going back through documents. So let's talk, we keep throwing that word around, documents. So what are some documents that congregations should be paying attention to if they are really serious about capturing their history? What documents should they be looking at and paying attention to?
Yeah, well, you really did a good job of highlighting how this work is not just about telling our long distant history, but about preserving the record of what's happening now so that future historians will be able to tell complex stories. Because I mean, so often, when you see a congregational history that's all about the ministers, it's not because the person who wrote that history didn't care about anybody else. It's that they couldn't find the materials they needed to tell other people's stories. So kind of, I mean, the two recent stories that just come immediately to mind would be the story of the white supremacy teach-ins that happened in UU congregations a few years ago, continue in some congregations. But I would definitely, encourage everyone who's listening to, maybe look into, did our congregation keep track of the resources we used? If you did a teach-in, the resources that you used, who was involved? Most likely it was your religious educator who took the lead. It was Loretta, the organization of religious educators, that spearheaded that process. So, keeping some record of that will enable future historians to tell a story of your congregation that kind of shows the ways religious educators often are at the forefront of transformation. And then, of course, congregational responses to COVID are a great opportunity to begin thinking about how you will assemble your electronic archive. Undoubtedly, you have some YouTube stuff or Zoom meeting recordings, and I'll be honest, I don't have any particular expertise here, but I would encourage every congregation, to find the expert who can make sure that at least a good sample of what you've done in terms of remote worship is preserved in a way that it might still be available even if Zoom and YouTube no longer exist.
So I posed this question to both you, Erin, and to Dan. What's been the most challenging? What's been the most surprising? And what's been the most amazing experience you've had with the circle? I know that was a lot. Surprising, amazing, challenging.
I think all of those things coalesce into what I was just thinking about because of your beautiful stories, encountering congregational histories that are written up to today. There are so many that are written up until 2003 or 2007, and then they kind of peter off, and we're missing the storytelling that continues today, and our attention to our surroundings, our attention to our contemporaries, just as you were offering to us. And I think it's that's something that surprised me. I'm not sure why it surprised me, because of course there are individuals who kind of spearhead these projects, and then they complete it, and then the congregation moves on, or that person moves away, or something, and it kind of peters out. But it's so amazing to see the active storytelling that goes on, of people being intentional and not just keeping records, but keeping their narratives and updating it as change is made, as progress is made, as programming begins, as membership changes. And that's a challenge, one, because so many of them end, but also a surprise and something beautiful that I've come to appreciate.
Thank you. What about you, Dan?
Well, one thing, I guess the most challenging thing is the sheer scale of the potential work to be done.
Mm.
So we started out kind of setting ourselves the task of coming up with a complete list of all the congregations that have created histories in one form or another. And I don't think we're ever going to come to the end of that particular task. I think new histories may be being created faster than we're adding them to our list. So we may actually be getting further behind. I don't know. And so the challenge really is how to make steady work on what will always be an imperfect resource, while also attending to what feels most important to the individuals who are out there doing the work of keeping their congregation stories. In terms of surprising and amazing, I guess I'll talk a little bit in relation to work that I do that is adjacent to the Circle of Congregational Historians, and that is my practice of asking students in my UU history course to write part of the history of a particular congregation as the final paper. So, even though I feel like I know a lot about Unitarian Universalism in general, I'm always learning amazing new things through these students' papers. And I guess two things that have been surprising. One, it's always surprising when a student comes across a story in the archive that's a little bit different from the story that's being told. Maybe somebody has a memory of what happened 40 years ago, and there's a piece of paper in an archive that says, oh, actually, they said the opposite of what they remember saying. And so you have to then find out how you honor both of that, because both things tell you some truth, right? The way something is remembered is also part of the whole story. And then a more particular surprise, which has, it's emerged just by chance. It's emerged in several of the papers that my students are writing for me right now, which is that in the first decades of the 19th century, there were a significant number of congregations who didn't entirely know whether they were a Unitarian congregation or a Universalist congregation. In general, we think of these as two separate movements. But there were congregations that were part of the Massachusetts Standing Order getting tax support that got taken over by Universalists. And there were congregations that were part of the Unitarian side of the Unitarian controversy that wound up calling ministers who had previously been serving Universalist congregations. And as you can well imagine, these kinds of congregations wound up telling very confusing stories later on about which they were.
How interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I'd like to share, as we begin to wind down, one of my field research stories. So the Fund for Theological Education gave me a small grant. I've been in love with Frances Ellen Watkins Harper since I first became UU and discovered she's well known in women's studies circles and literature, Black literature, but at that time, not necessarily as a Unitarian. So I was aware of her, but I didn't know she was Unitarian. When I found out she was, I got permission. It was time to write a paper in a class. And as a result, I applied for the grant, got it, and I actually traveled to Philadelphia to do field research. Here are my memories that I will relish for the rest of my life. Number one, going to the congregation, I guess that was First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia. they have a safe there, this huge safe that they keep her documents in. They have the Pew rental receipt that she signed. She paid $5 a year. And then when she shared it with someone else, it was less than that. But they keep that document in a safe. The other thing that I did is that I went to the cemetery, Eden Cemetery. This is the oldest Black public cemetery in the country, and very esteemed Blacks are buried there. She is in a section called the John Brown section, and her plot is right up from her daughter's because her daughter died a few years before she did. So I had the privilege to actually be able to see the headstone, and I've taken pictures of it, so on and so forth. And then going back into the history and hearing about this pilgrimage that was undertaken back in 92, I believe, 1992. I was just becoming a UU, and I had just started a doctoral program. I had papers due and so on and so forth. I didn't understand the significance of this pilgrimage, and so I didn't go, and I missed it. To this day, it's the one regret that I have. But I've talked with people that attended, so on and so forth. Where I'm going with this story is that they had commissioned one of the only Black headstone makers, a Black female. They had commissioned her to create a headstone because they were understanding that it was unmarked. So they're digging the soil to put this headstone in place and uncover the original headstone. Now, to this day,
oh my goodness.
Yes, but what I have not been able to discern is where is that original one? Because I have a picture of the commissioned one. I have a picture of her daughter's headstone. I even went to Mother Bethel AME thinking maybe they might have it. I haven't been able to discern where that headstone is, but in the process, I discovered Mother Bethel AME, which is the other faith community that Frances Ellen Watkins Harper was affiliated with. They actually have a museum in the basement, and unfortunately, the person that was on duty that was staffing that day, she had no knowledge of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. I was very disappointed. So
well, that's that focus on ministers again.
Well, that's a good point. And also her contributions evidently were not as valued within the AME tradition as in Unitarian Universalism. That may have shifted, but just the fact that I didn't see any presence whatsoever of her existence and her contributions. And last story. So while I was in town, the African American Museum had a special exhibit on her. It's a huge building, and across the entire front was a banner with her name. When you go inside, they had a bigger than life replica of her. You push buttons and it starts giving you history and telling you. I mean, the city has really embraced her as someone that has been significant in her contributions. One last story. I went on the tour that the park rangers do, and unfortunately, they were naming all these abolitionists and their contributions, so on and so forth. And afterwards, when they finished, I talked with him. He was not aware whatsoever of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. So I promised to send him, and I have the email from him, the email I sent. He promised to include her in future tours and thanked me for this information. I mean, I was so thrilled that I was able to inform him about someone that should have been included in the tour especially if you're talking about abolitionists and, and the work that she did, so on and so forth. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Any final observations or comments you would like to make as we wrap up?
I'd like to say that anybody can contribute to our project. Really,
Good point.
Not everybody has to write or publish an entire book about a specific congregation, or think about all of the social content. It's really like document writing or collecting websites. Just there's something that anybody can do, and we have research guides we can help too. So that's what I would like to know.
And I think we have to keep emphasizing that, because I think some of the reluctance is people think, well, I don't have the skills, to do research. I'm not trained in that respect, but like you said, talking with someone and capturing their experiences, that's something, that almost anyone can do. So yes, Dan, any final comments or observations?
Well, I guess it falls on me to say that if you want to become part of the work of the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists, you can send an email to me and Erin at ucircle@hds.harvard.edu. So ucircle@HDS, the acronym for Harvard Divinity School, .harvard.edu. You can also go to the website of the UU Studies Network just by Googling UU Studies Network, and you can find our introductory packet that describes a little bit more of what we're doing. So if you are or know of the person who cares for the story of your congregation, we really would like to hear from you.
Great, thank you so much. And when we post this conversation, we'll be sure to list that information so that people can find you. And thank you so much, Erin and Dan. This has been, as you can see, this is one of my big interests, and this is very exciting. When I saw the listing of the congregations and how many of them actually have archives and libraries, so on and so forth, I thought, yeah, this is looking better than I really thought. I was getting a little jaded, thinking, our congregations just really don't care, but I see that they do, and they've just been quietly gathering their information and putting together history, so on and so forth. And with the help of the Circle of Congregational Historians and Archivists, they are going to become even more informed and able to do this work and network with others that are doing it. I'm hoping that the Circle decides to do a workshop at General Assembly in June. So if so, keep me in mind, because I'm definitely willing to support you on that. And on that note, thank you, Erin. Thank you, Dan. This has been one of those conversations that I just get very, very excited about. Thank you for joining us. And those of you in the website world, thank you for joining us here at Sister Source Conversations. And until next time, be blessed and be a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Let me stop recording.